next in terms of the criminal investigation into Peter Mandelson. The Met Police says it has received a number of reports relating to alleged misconduct in a public office and will review them to determine if they meet the criminal threshold for investigation. The criminal lawyer Daw KC joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
The Met say they are investigating these emails. What criminal offences might Lord Mandelson have committed? I mean, how much trouble is he in here?
Well, obviously, let's be very careful about saying he's in trouble, in inverted commas. We know that the Metropolitan Police have received complaints or reports about him, and the public information I've seen is that those reports are for what's called a common law offence of misconduct in a public office. And by common law, I mean it's an offence that's developed over the centuries rather than one that's written down in black and white in a statute book. But misconduct in public office is where an office holder, and that includes a government minister, has willfully abused his or her position. It requires a willful intent, not just negligence or neglect. It has to be extremely serious as a breach of the public's trust, and it has to, as I say, be deliberate or reckless and have no reasonable excuse. So essentially, a public office holder, like a minister, willfully abusing their position for reasons that are wholly improper and which deserve a criminal sanction. That's what's being investigated, or at least that's what's being looked into by the Metropolitan Police. Whether it becomes a formal criminal investigation and, of course, whether it ultimately leads to any charges is a lot further down the line.
Is it necessary in the case you described for money to have changed hands?
No, that's not necessary, but plainly that would be a very significant element of proving that there was a willful abuse of position, because I think any government minister, or in fact any of us, any of your listeners know that government ministers can't take money from third parties, which may have some impact on the way that they conduct themselves in office, for example, over policy or anything else, or looking after the private interests of an individual. So once money becomes involved, it makes the picture a lot more serious and potentially a lot more significant from a criminal law perspective.
And in terms of some of the information that was shared, I mean, some of it is marked as coming from official Downing Street accounts. And again, as you say, you know, there are questions about who sent what when. But, you know, is there an element of this which might touch on the Official Secrets Act or even bribery and corruption laws?
It's possible, although it's a much narrower test in terms of the Official Secrets Act in particular. It only protects a very tightly defined selection of documents, and there has to be proof of real harm, and not just, as it were, political or reputational damage. So official secrets is very, very difficult, particularly when it comes to ministers who do have the power to release information, of course, from time to time themselves. As far as bribery is concerned, there was a crossover period. I think these events took place in the late 2000s and the early 2010s. We have the Bribery Act 2010 didn't come into force until 2011, so question marks about that. But that would, of course, require proof that that Mandelson had received financial advantage and in return for that had given something back. In other words, some sort of corrupt bargain. It's not just leaking per se. So I think all roads eventually lead to misconduct in a public office, because that's the exact situation in which Mandelson was at the time, occupying a high public office as a Minister of the Crown. And the question is whether his actions, if they are formally investigated, are so serious that they would merit criminal prosecution and possible criminal sanction. And that, in the end, will be for police officers and ultimately for the Crown Prosecution Service to decide.
And finally, can you set in context for us, you know, how significant a moment would that be? I realise we are talking about hypotheticals, and I realise that you are a KC, and that is something that often KCs do not like to do. But in this case, I mean, how significant would it be if this were to go in that direction in terms of other sort of political scandals that we've seen?
Well, it would be quite extraordinary, wouldn't it? Because the political scandals which we've seen over recent years have tended to focus around expenses, either in the House of Commons or in the House of Lords. So claiming expenses for things which politicians or members of Parliament hadn't really had. And we had a number of those kinds of cases. But the idea of a very senior minister being prosecuted in a criminal court for actions in respect of a convicted paedophile with whom that minister or former minister had a financial relationship as well as a friendship. Well, I certainly in my 30-something years as a criminal barrister have never seen a case like that.
Daw KC, thank you very much for your time this morning.